Hello. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing. Alright. I think it's working. I see a green bar moving. Apologies for technical issues. It's been a while since I've done a video or a stream. And I updated my software. As we all know, a persistent difficulty with software in our current era is the updating problem. Like something like a pencil. Learn to use it once and it doesn't really change. Maybe you change. Your hand gets stronger. You learn some new words. You get some new paper. Something like that. Understandable. You get a dictionary. You learn to look up words in the dictionary. You learn some grammatical categories. And that dictionary is good to go. But web interfaces and software is not always that way. Could be that you knew how to do something on your phone. You update your phone. And then suddenly you have to consult our Google overlords in order to learn a new way of doing things. So that's the state of software. Alright, cool. So I got a request from a friend or two or three, some people, to start doing videos again. I haven't done a video in a while because I didn't really feel a compelling need to say anything because I was doing lots of stuff and learning a lot of stuff. Sorry about rustling papers. I was looking for the specific notes about what this friend asked. After just rambling on about paper for a couple seconds, then I'm having problems shuffling through notes. Okay, cool. So there were some recommended topics, but then this morning I had a little bit of time before my normal day job, so I was working and researching various topics, and I ran across this title of what is called in English the rectification of names. So I'm actually going to pull up the Wikipedia and go through, because I think the Wikipedia article is pretty good at summarizing some points. Now note, just as a disclaimer, I'm not claiming any authority on any manners related to, oh, this is what the ancient text actually says. Rather, I'm going off of the Wikipedia here, which might be a Westerner's interpretation of these things. And I'm going to comment about how many of the ideas here in the rectification of names with Chinese is related to Christian teachings, which have been passed down for a long time. So just fun Greek note, in Greek, the word ethnos, where we get English ethnicity, words like this, is often translated into things like of the nations or the peoples or something like that. The Gentiles, for all the people that don't come from the Hebrew, the Israelites of the Bible, then everybody else falls under the ethnos pretty much. So among those various nations would be the Han Chinese and the Japanese and the Russians and whoever else under the sun. And so when Christians talk about Christ becoming incarnate, things like this, then it's a revelation to the Gentiles as well as to the Jewish people. It's a general thing. The original sense of the word Catholic is not like the Roman Catholic Church today, but Catholic as in being all-inclusive for everybody. And so here, we could ask a question. We have a lot of different people in the world, a lot of different people watching this stream, and you hear about all these different religions or practices in the world. I think a natural question that a lot of people have is, okay, where do I fit into this story? For instance, like if you're a Chinese person, then you might ask the question, would it be more natural for me to be Buddhist or Taoist or something else? Why should I even take a look at this thing called Christianity, which seems like it's a foreign religion from the Middle East, like it's for desert people or something. Somebody might have that sort of ideas. But you go and you dig deeper, you start learning about all sorts of stuff in the world, and lo and behold, you see that there are many arrows pointing in the same direction. So today the topic is rectification of names, but more generally, I want to talk about the notion of correct naming. So let's get on our notes. Correct naming. We're all going to learn a Chinese character today, which is this one, which is Zhang. And it means correct or right. This is actually, fun fact, how Chinese people do tally marks. So in English, we would go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For whatever reason, this is the characters that is often used in East Asia when people count. It's like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a standard stroke order for it. So that's cool. Oh, kind of off topic. This is another. Are there coincidences in the world? This is Allen Stream 45. Allen Stream 45 is 3 squared, which is 9, times 5. So here, Zhang, this character, 5 strokes. And then we'll talk about 3 and 2. Very Christian numbers. Trinity, 3 and 2, the dual nature of Christ, human and man. And then we multiply it by the 5 strokes of the Chinese character. And that is equal to 45. Allen Stream number 45. Coincidence? Okay, let's get back on topic. So, correct naming, rectification of names. So this topic became interesting to me because I've noticed that in studying linguistics, being in academia especially, there is a big emphasis on changing language, introducing new words, introducing models to understand the world. So let's just pull up some examples of this so you could know what I'm talking about. I'm going to search words of the year. And we're going to come across a handful of made up new words. So I'm just making notes about what we're doing. Oop, crap. Okay. Let me switch my view. Info view. Okay. Words of the year. So here, for instance, let's go into Oxford Languages and then check out Merriam-Webster. And we're going to look at some of the words of the year. So the point of this exercise is me just showing you how popular media manifested in the internet and major publications in our current time presents new vocabulary for people to look at. So what are some of the words of the years here? 2021, vax. So this is a monosyllabic, single syllable way, abbreviated, quick way for people to talk about vaccines. And those, as we know, are a relatively modern technology in our current understanding. And well, I don't need to comment more about them except to say that they're a relatively new thing, and the people that control it and the way that you get these things is through our current establishment. So it's like the one thing that saves people of our current establishment. That's how that is often presented. Okay. 2020. Unprecedented. Word of the year 2018. Toxic. Now, okay, so all of these words, they might have an original sense. And by the way, if you want to go and look up original sense of words, my favorite sources go here to Wiktionary. So, for instance, let's look up the word vaccine and see where the word vaccine comes from. Okay, from Latin, vaccinus, from vacca, cow, because of early use of the cowpox virus against smallpox. Compare New Latin, vadiola vaccina. Okay, what's a vadiola? And that would be a type of disease related to cows. Okay, and the name for this disease would describe the symptoms of it. So spotted, speckled, you'll see like pock marks. So I'll even criticize Wiktionary here. I don't know if everybody in the past described this as an infectious disease. Like it was a disease and you had spots. So the name would be like variola, probably because it would refer to like a variegated pattern, something like that. So the name here would be fitting in that it would describe how the thing looked, something like that. Okay, now I'm just curious. Let's just go and look at variola. What does that mean? Latin etymology. Yeah, so as I was saying, from various, variegated, also coming meaning spotted or speckled. So I spelled variegated wrong. That's why my image search wasn't as helpful as I wanted it to be, I think. Let's try again. Variegated. Okay, yeah, so like on different leaves, it's not all one color. You can see discoloration in some areas and not in others. Variegated leaves. So if you have like a skin condition, your skin manifests such a pattern, it would probably be a sign of some kind of sickness versus healthfulness. Like most people would prefer not variegated patterns on themselves. So variola, infectious disease, blah blah. Okay, so here the example I'm showing is that a lot of the common words that we hear thrown around today are made up relatively recently. But if we look into the etymologies, we go and we look at the older names for stuff, we can see how these old names are actually very descriptive, and they also don't come with all sorts of theoretical baggage. For example, this term would just be describing like a manifest physical characteristic of the thing, whereas in a modern sense, if you started to talk about this, like by just defining it as this, an infectious disease causing pustulous pox, you're introducing all this technical jargon that is not immediately manifest to someone. Like, let's suppose that this disease is some kind of, like, there's some skin condition where this manifests that's more of a genetic or an inherited disease, then maybe, it would be incorrect to call it an infectious disease, and so on and so forth. So I'm not telling everybody to like not use these words or anything, but this is just to say, if we actually look at words and go into what they mean, where they come from, and so on and so forth, then we could start to get a better understanding about stuff. Okay, so to not get too discursive and go on too many examples here, I'm going to flip back to this Wikipedia article, Rectification of Names, and I'm going to read and comment on some of the paragraphs here to show how this ancient idea corresponds precisely to what I'm saying right now about how, various language education type institutions try to change and influence language, and how for Confucius and for many others, this was a big issue problem. Okay, so let's go here. The rectification of names, Chinese, 正名, is originally a doctrine of feudal Confucian designations and relationships, behaving accordingly to ensure social harmony. Without such accordance, society would essentially crumble and, quote, undertakings would not be completed. Mencius extended the doctrine to include questions of political legitimacy. When Confucius was asked what he would do if he was governor, he said he would, quote, rectify the names, end quote, to make words correspond to reality. Okay, so here, big idea. What is the correct use of words? Rectification of names. Words correctly correspond to actually how reality is. So you have a word, like I just gave the example of variegated. So there's a reality of sometimes coloration for stuff is kind of spotty or mixed, and we have a name for that, which is variegated, which has this root, like various, this sort of thing. So it's a very descriptive, good name to describe something. So variegated leaves, right? You could say you're painting a variegated pattern on the wall, and so on and so forth. Oh, we're greeted by another guest, TY 2048. Sup? Thanks for stopping by. Okay, continuing. So I'm not gonna read too much about the history, but I want to skip to the ideas here. Okay. There was some good quotes. Okay, so here we're just gonna go straight to Confucius. We're gonna do the good Chinese way. All right. Quote from Confucius. So this is from the Analects. So I'll read the intro. The Analects states that social disorder often stems from failure to call things by their proper names. That is, to perceive, understand, and deal with reality. Okay, so as humans, one thing we do is we deal with reality, and we name stuff, explain stuff, communicate with other people through language. For those of you here who have read the Bible or studied Genesis, you'll know that one of the earliest things that is mentioned about people doing in the Bible is that Adam, the first created man, goes out and he names things in the world. That's one of the things that he does. So it's a very human, logical thing. As humans, we have intelligible speech. Unlike, you could say, the irrational animals. The animals don't name stuff, and they don't communicate with language, but people do. And one of the early jobs of Adam, tasks of Adam, was to give names to all the other things in creation. Okay, so names used to perceive, understand, and deal with reality. His solution to this was the, quote, rectification of names, end quote. He gave an explanation to one of his disciples. And here's the quote. A superior man, in regard to what he does not know, shows a cautious reserve. If names be not correct, language is not in accordance with the truth of things. If language be not in accordance with the truth of things, affairs cannot be carried on to success. When affairs cannot be carried on to success, proprieties and music do not flourish. That's an interesting one. We'll talk about that. When proprieties and music do not flourish, punishments will not be properly awarded. When punishments are not properly awarded, the people do not know how to move hand or foot. Therefore, a superior man considers it necessary that the names he uses may be spoken appropriately, and also that what he speaks may be carried out appropriately. What the superior man requires is just that in his words there may be nothing incorrect. So I don't know. Sounds pretty based to me. Let's talk about how this manifests. Okay, so this part I highlighted here on the screen. When affairs cannot be carried on to success, proprieties and music do not flourish. So let's just talk about one clear way in which people use words and language. So if you're carrying out some sort of business, like let's say you're doing some kind of performance, you're hosting an event. Okay, that might be a type of propriety, right? A guest is coming from far away, so you're welcoming a visitor. So there would be a proper way to do that, and you would need to have the proper names to do stuff. So for example, let's say that there's a head table. So the guest of honor gets to sit at a head table, a place of respect. So you might instruct people, oh, please, set this special food, this special offering at the head table. Please, make sure that you put the nice chairs at the head table. Please bring this item from here to there. Make sure that at that table they do not run out of wine, and so on and so forth. There's all sorts of things that you might carry out and use language to do for proprieties. Now, if the language is all messed up and you don't know what you're naming, then you cannot properly carry out the function. So, for instance, let's pretend we go and we visit a school, and I say to you, hey, here's $100. Go over to the cool kid table and give it to the coolest cat on the block. Okay, I just use a bunch of slang, kind of sloppy language there. One might ask, okay, so how do I know what the cool kids table is? How do I know, who's the coolest cat on the block? And if to that I reply, oh, that cosmopolitan urban city slicker who's got dollar bills dropping out of his dank drip. I used all these different words, but do they have a clear correspondence with reality? Do they name something in particular? If somebody embeds themselves in these subcultures, they try to understand and find what these new words mean, then maybe they could understand and carry out what I ask. But for most people, there's a bunch of confusion with that. Another example I was just thinking about today at work. So currently I'm doing like trades type work, and like a common task that somebody might have to do is like I work with like wood and cabinets and stuff. So you might ask for a particular tool. Now let's say you wanted a circular saw. So let's pull up a picture of a circular saw. Circular saw. So you might ask someone, please go and get me the 7-inch circular saw. It's sitting by my bag right out on the customer's driveway. Okay, that would be a very explicit, clear instruction. And if somebody did not follow that instruction, that would not be good. Now, on the other hand, if I didn't have the correct use of names and I just said, oh yeah, hey, can you go get the tool that I need? Can you go get the thing? Right? Without the proper use of language, without the proper use of these things, it might take more time for the thing to be fulfilled. It might take more time to complete the task. So, long way roundabout of saying, right, we need to we need correct language to perceive, understand, and deal with reality. And what Confucius was saying, affairs cannot be carried on to success without this. And some cases, it might just be slower, like in the example I said. But in other cases, of course, you could utterly fail and ruin and break stuff. So, for instance, if I said, oh, yeah, give me such and such 3/8 inch drill bit, and then somebody hands me a 5/8 inch drill bit and I don't notice the difference because they didn't properly give me the item that I named. Let's say I drill in a hole that's too big, then there might be no undo button. There might be no way of going back. And then, maybe I lost my company $50. Maybe I lost myself $50, if I'm working for myself. So correct use of names for practical stuff, very important. With music and the arts, you could also see how this could clearly manifest. Like if you said, play a A chord, and then they play like a B flat chord, it's going to sound like crap because they didn't properly play the thing that you named. So all of this, very, very intuitive, makes sense, not very hard to understand. Yet, what we see at work all over in our society is efforts to change, to remix, to make language not correct, which Confucius would not approve of, as Confucius advocates this rectification of names doctrine. George says, how much time does a president spend presiding? Let's correct names. All right, let's look up this word. That's actually an interesting one. How many Americans know what the word preside means? So first, I'll go to president. So we'll go English etymology. Etymology, from Old French président, from Latin praesidens, presiding over, president, leader. The Latin word is, grammar. The original meaning of the verb is to sit before, in the sense of presiding at a meeting. A secondary meaning of the verb is to command, to govern. So to sit and to give orders and to command, that would be a thing that presidents do. We don't know where a president is presiding from a lot of the times. Like me here on YouTube, it seems like he's just in a studio. Okay, let's look at the Latin word. So, if you could literally see your leader face to face sitting before you, presiding over you, saying like, okay, everybody, what we're going to do today is, I don't know, go all out into the field and pick apples and then dig a ditch. That would be like a very direct way of commanding. But now, I guess, president is like somebody sitting at a computer, being the figurehead or announcer for campaigns designed by think tanks or something. I don't know what's going on. You guys tell me. But yeah, certainly it seems the word president is correct. It seems like a correct name in the sense that let's say that America is being run like a big corporation. Then you have a CEO that presides over meetings. So the job of the president is to sit and preside over meetings to describe the fate of a company. And we see that America is kind of run like a corporation in many ways. Oh man, see, this rabbit hole keeps on going. Like we look at a word like corporation. Okay, correct namings. What does a corporation mean? And we could look at that etymology. A corporation, assumption of a body. So it's kind of like a incarnation principle. So instead of like Christ becoming incarnate, a corporation is some created idea, thing that takes on a body, some form. Like Taco Bell. Taco Bell has a real a body, a form in the world. It's in all these places all around the world. The beans, the tortillas, they could be found found in so many places. Hecka says, "Ah, rats, I'm late. Welcome." Cool. Okay, so let's get back to Confucius here. So, Confucius brought up this idea that society collapses when you don't correctly name stuff. So, a clear solution to that problem would be to start calling things by their correct names. Then things could return to their proper order and stuff could succeed. Now, one big way in which one thing Confucius is known for would be teaching of proper societal relationships through things like ruler to subject, parent to child, husband to wife, elder brother to younger brother, and friend to friend. So if people try to disrupt these relationships and go in the wrong direction, then you'll see social disharmony. So if a subject is trying to act like a ruler, that's like a revolution, usurping power. That's not correct. Or if a child's talking back to their parent or trying to parent the parent, then also too, you might see that that's an unnatural, not good way for relationships to happen. We have terms, who is wearing the pants in the relationship, right? What's implied by that is that maybe the wife takes up the role that would be typical of the husband, right? Likewise, you might see, in a relationship, there seem to be problems because maybe the wife makes a lot more money than the husband, and, so on and so forth. We could talk another day about how popular media does much to to subvert all of these relationships. But that's to say, along with having a concern about properly naming things, the context in which Confucius was talking about that would be in a proper ordering of society. Okay. And then this just goes on and gives some examples about Confucius. Okay, let's look at a different quote. So this is not from Confucius, but from another teacher that I'm sure read or studied Confucius. Let's look at this quote. Nets are for catching fish. After one gets the fish, one forgets the net. Traps are for catching rabbits. After one gets the rabbit, one forgets the trap. Words are for getting meaning. After one gets the meaning, one forgets the words. Where can I find people who have forgotten words and have a word with them? Haha. So here's an expansion of how this idea isn't just silly, stupid, but it's very profound. So it's like we could explain it. We could talk about like correctly naming stuff. Why is that important? And we could understand it intellectually. It's extremely easy to understand intellectually. It's like, do what this person says and things will go smoothly. Yet, when you really think about it, it's like, I think in Christian terms, one might call it something like the mystery of obedience. Something like that. Okay. Okay, so anyways, rectification of names. I thought that this was a very relevant idea now that we have the sort of general Confucian take about this. And if anybody in the comments has anything to add or elaborate, feel free to bring it up. I want to now talk about how this idea connects with today, and then also too with the Christian tradition, specifically the Orthodox tradition, because now I am Orthodox. When I started this stream, I was entering, but now I'm officially Orthodox, and I believe that the Orthodox are the correct church, and I will say some reasons why. So let's start with this character. The rectifications of names is called 正名. 正, this is the word that means correct, proper, straight, orthogonal. You can see there's orthogonal lines in it. I'll pull up my notes here. This character. Interestingly, that is also the character that is used in the word for the Orthodox Church. And the word Orthodox carries with it the same meaning. So in Greek, ortho, that root is from Greek. We could check it out and look at that on... We could look at that on Wiktionary. I want the etymology. I don't want you to be Wikipedia. Oh no, you're making me go in circles. Okay, let's just try ortho. Alright. Technical, science, jargon, blah blah blah. So this is the one word that they're not giving me etymologies from. Alright, we have to type it in Greek. Okay, orthos must be that. Alright, upright, erect, straight, correct, right, sound. So, doing construction, building a house, obviously you want a lot of things to be square, so that they will be structurally sound. If something is tipping, if it is not straight, erect, upright, and so on and so forth, then over time it's prone to crumble and to fall. So likewise, you could say with respect to teaching or learning, it is in your best interest to have and use a correct teaching, so that your life will go straight. And here, like this meaning too, like the straight and the narrow path. You say that someone is an upright person. Okay, if you're being an upright person and you're walking on a straight path, then it follows that you should want to follow the correct, right, and sound teaching. So that is the etymology, the word, the root that's in the word orthodox. In Greek, ОРТHОДОКСИЯ, and then in Russian, ПРАВОСЛАВИЕ, something like that. It's the same combination of words, just translated, like it's different sounds, but it's pointing to the same meanings. And like in Chinese, we could call it, I think, 正教, which would literally also mean correct teaching. Yeah, so here, 正教会, oh, this is Japanese, but 正教会 would mean correct teaching assembly, basically. And the claim of the Orthodox Church, which I personally believe, is that the Orthodox Church does maintain the correct teaching. So it's the place where you would see names fitting and following what they say they are. So let us rewind and look at some other topics briefly. On the title screen for this, I had another use with this Chinese character, zheng, and it was referring to a quote that I learned from martial arts class back in the day. True victory is victory over oneself. Here we go. This one. Masakatsu agatsu. True or right, correct victory, self-victory. It would be kind of a literal translation of these four juxtaposed characters. And here, interesting name usages again. So what might be a victory that isn't true, that isn't right, that isn't correct? For instance, you might have heard, I don't know how to spell it, of a Pyrrhic victory. I'll let the web browser correct my spelling. So like a pure victory is a victory that inflicts such a devastating toll on the victor that it is tantamount to defeat. Such a victory negates any true sense of achievement or damages long-term progress. So if you had a Pyrrhic victory, that would be an example of a not true victory, because it would be, well, okay, I know a lot of people that work in software or tech related or business type fields, are my friends, so I'll give an example from this. Let's say you optimize the thing. It's like, oh yeah, we got this marketing sales metric up. But in getting that sales metric up, let's pretend you totally destroyed your company's brand. Or, you totally optimized one thing, but then you broke user experience totally in another way. Then that would be a true victory, in the sense of a manager or supervisor that only checks one thing would be, oh yeah, that's a victory because you submitted the ticket, you accomplished the thing. But it would not be the true victory, the masakatsu de wa nai. It would be fake katsu, fake pork cutlet. It wouldn't be real victory. Anyways, so this Japanese quote way back that I learned from the study of Aikido is true victory is victory over oneself. And you could think and talk about what the general teaching of that is, but basically it's like, the martial art itself isn't about like how many people could like I totally own and defeat, but that you're practicing the art, you're doing a thing similar to how someone might work out, go to the gym, do things not so that they could just lift the heaviest rock. The point isn't to be able to lift the heaviest rock, but it's through practicing and doing a particular activity that you are able to master your body. And after you master your body, then you could go and you could also make progress in other areas. For example, having proper relationships with other people, and so on and so forth. So, connecting East and West here, I'll just summarize and then I'll kind of go into open discussion and mixed topics here. We started talking about the Confucian idea of called the rectification of names, 正名. And this goes way back. So BC era. You could do your own research to see the dating, but way back. And an ancient idea that by having the correct namings for things, society could function well. We have to work and deal with other people. If you did everything yourself, then you don't even need to use language that much to just do what you do. But because we live in a society, we have to talk with other people, interact with other people, and so on and so forth. And one way to make that succeed, according to Confucius, and I think this is fitting with Christian teaching as well, is by using the correct words and names for things. So if we do that, this could help make things be as they should. What does it mean to manifest the kingdom of heaven on earth? In the kingdom of heaven, language is something that we as created beings in this world and this earth have to use. We aren't telepathic. We don't read each other's thoughts instantly. So we have to use our bodies. We have to use our tongue, our lips, our breath, and all of this to communicate stuff with our words. Now with our fingers as we type on the interwebs. And so to manifest like a heavenly order of things, if on this earth in our life as we live and we practice, we learn to use the correct patterns, which includes saying the correct names for things, then we could find success in our undertakings, and we could complete our undertakings. Oh, one other word. So the word perfect, you might have heard the word like perfectionist used in a psychobabble jargon, but perhaps the original sense of the word perfect is something like completion. If you study grammar, you will certainly come across this idea of the perfective aspect, which is saying a verb denotes that the event a verb describes is completed. So if I said, I eat food, it's something that's ongoing. It's not completed. It's not done. But if I say I ate the burrito, then I'm describing a particular action has been completed. So in one sense, a verb is using a perfective meaning, and in the other way, it is not. When I said, in my childhood, cuando era niño, blah, blah, blah. Spanish class, you may have encountered this. You're describing some continuous state in the past, whereas if you said, you could use like a different verb conjugation to say that you completed and you did an action, as opposed to it was something that you did or something that you're still doing. Anyway, so let's go back to perfect. So etymology of perfect. And perfect has to do with, I'm looking for the meaning that means fulfillment or completion. Okay, so oftentimes, here's another hack. On Wiktionary, if you want to know the real meanings of words, the 正名, the correct names, you have to go to the usages that they call obsolete. So here's some well-informed, certain, true, innocent, guileless. Okay, so that's more in English. We want to go back to, let's go to the Latin perfectus, because the English word comes from that. And okay, so here's some meanings from the Latin which are relevant. Okay, achieved, executed, carried out, finished, completed, perfected, excellent, exquisite, brought about, cause, having been brought about or caused, and then the grammatical sense. So in Bible teachings, for instance, when God created the world, each of the 6 days, something is done, and then God sees that as good. So God perfectly did the thing for each of those days, and then on the seventh day, he rested. Is that the case for us? Like, oftentimes, no. It's like, oh yeah, I was going to study, but then I fell asleep. Or, I was going to finish this workout, but I got lazy. Or, and so on and so forth. I was going to meet this friend, but then they were really late, and I had to go somewhere, so I called off the plan. All those are examples of not perfect, also in the sense of completion or fulfilling or going through with stuff. So rectification of names, correctly calling things by what they are, using the right words for stuff, is something that Confucius said, correctly identified, I believe, as one way in which we ensure social harmony and the success of undertakings and making of society to be more perfect. Cool. All right, we got a couple comments. Hecka says, I'm jealous at how smoothly his language translation works. If only Linux could perform the basic task, such as language keyboard switching. Yes, it's not a perfect software setup. WHJ says, hi, what's up? Good to hear from you. All right. Okay, so rectification of names, correctly doing stuff, examples from trades. So correctly naming stuff. If you ask for stuff, you need this to do things correctly. Okay, now let's go to more kind of general knowledge, more practical application, and how we could all use this idea in order to better understand the world and succeed in what we want to do. Because who wants to be a loser? We want to have a true victory, and victory over ourselves, also victory in carefully and correctly using language, which in this stream, lots of ums, uhs, and sloppy use of language. So I myself am announcing this to also urge myself to correctly use words. As Confucius say, a superior man in regard to what he does not know shows a cautious reserve. You don't just talk and repeat ideological stuff or psychobabble or whatever if you don't know what you're saying. Instead, you show cautious reserve and correctly name stuff, correctly speak in a way in which language is in accordance with the truth of things. And then propriety as a music will flourish. I think generally this is the case. So what was the example I was going to look at? Oh yeah. Okay, so going back, we can see that a lot of society now is controlled by introducing new words, new language, and trying to give people new patterns to think about stuff, which intuitively don't agree with reality. But if people say it again and again and again, this conditioning gets people to take these categories, these words, for granted, and then we can already see collapse of society around it. So let's look at some proper English usage. New York Times. What's your word of the year? All right. Oh no. I've reached my limit of articles. All right. Well, words of the year. Look, they're trying to copyright language. This is difficult. Okay, words of the year suggestion from Women Create Weekly. Ignite. Does that mean you should go out and commit arson? Is that what it means? Obviously not. So the word ignite here is used probably to say, don't just be, get up, I don't know, have your cup of coffee and do stuff. Okay, relax, rejoice, ascend. Okay, so these are just general good positive words. This is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking more for words of the year. Looking for a list. Hecka says you need to get the archive extension. Yeah, I know that there's a lot of workaround type things that I could do. But what I'm also trying to do too is use the internet of the people. And I think that the copyrights and stuff like that is also, this is an experience that a lot of people have exploring and using the internet. So I find it helpful to actually experience that myself. Now, of course, if you're doing research and doing things, I totally understand why and how archive tools and stuff are useful. But I don't personally use them now. Okay, so here's a word. Obviously, lots of political implications with this word. Um, let's check the etymology for it. I'm curious. I won't say the word, but it has to do with an event that happened in the first month of the year on the day after the 5th. Okay, so here I think that this definition they use, this is pretty standard. This might be a correct way of saying it. An uprising against a government, rebellion, revolt, civil disorder, riot, illegal armed assault. Okay, so if this is like the worst thing ever that happened, then we could ask, well, how was the United States founded? Um, so here they try to associate this word strongly with this one thing that happened, whereas a very uh, nation was born in that. So I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. Why should we be surprised if I punch you in the face and take your house? Should I be surprised if somebody else punches me in the face? But instead of somebody else just punching me in the face, instead what I do is I hire a friend to pretend to punch me in the face, but I still get to own the house. I just get to say that that person punched me in the face. Seems more like that to me, but I don't know. Oh, okay. Here's a big one. Um, we see that the space agencies and stuff like to add or attach their new cosmic. Um, they like to associate words that might be associated with virtues, things that people do, to their organization. So they want it to be, when we think about um, NASA, we think about perseverance, scientists. Even if stuff is confusing, they keep on building technology and getting billions and billions of dollars from the money printer that goes burr for who knows what reasons. Um, and we should look up to them for being persistent. And it's not like you ran a marathon or climbed up a mountain. Instead, we see CG images of a rover um, filmed on Devon Island. I mean, Colorado. I mean, um, foreign landscape. Let's see what else. Okay, here's another one. Woke. So this word, totally overloaded. You could find, countless SJW and anti-SJW um, things all over the interwebs. But oftentimes, let's look at this word. What does woke usually mean? Oftentimes, it means just having some kind of intellectual idea. So here, aware of and actively attentive to important facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. Now, on the other hand, if we look at what are like older senses of the word woke, let's look at something like, I'll just pull up the idea of vigil, watchfulness, and I'll look up with its relationship to orthodoxy. And I'll just read from an official publication by Abbott Trefon, who the internet has banned and said a lot of bad things about. But it seems like he's been falsely accused of a lot of things. So watchfulness, wakefulness, being actually woke in the original sense, not an hour should pass without taking time to examine our heart. So looking in ourselves, saying, do I judge other people? Am I insisting on my will? Am I, being arrogant and treating other people like a poo-poo head? Okay, examine our heart, for the hour of judgment can come at any time. So you don't know when your life is going to end. So do I say, oh, today I'm just going to slack off and be lazy, and then tomorrow will make things right? Or every day are we watchful over ourselves? Just like you look at a computer monitor, right? To monitor, I don't know, what's going on in the world, monitor sorts of stuff. But are you monitoring yourself? And we must be ready to give account to God for our life. In the Gospel of Matthew 5:8, we read, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." It is clear that without a humble and contrite heart, we shall not see God. St. Isaac of Syria tells us, "No one has understanding if he is not humble, and he who lacks humility lacks understanding." The prescription given to us all by the Holy Fathers point that discrimination, that's another word, and watchfulness are the path to achieve purity of heart. For someone who is proud and who has not rooted out the sickness that is within his heart will be unable to please God, for only holiness of life opens the doors to the paradise that awaits us. So contrast woke by the Merriam-Webster definition here is being aware of racial and social justice issue. So a lot of it's accusing, saying he did bad, she did bad, so forth, always looking out, saying things about other people. But what in our definition of woke has to do with humility, like realizing, look at all these ways in which I have messed up, look at all these ways in which, I have furthered and caused, like how have I led to problems in this world by my own selfish acting? How have I grieved other people through the way I act? So with this definition of woke, we see an outward accusatory attitude looking at stuff, whereas the real sense of woke is looking and being aware of your own faults and sins and changing your life appropriately, which includes practicing discrimination. So discrimination, we always hear in the terms of, discrimination is bad because, discrimination is like, white people say that black people can't drink from their drinking fountain or something. Whereas, what does the word discrimination actually mean? We could look up a Wiktionary and let's look at the older senses of this word. Etymology, from Latin discriminatio, which happens to do distinguish. So probably used in the context of distinguishing right and wrong, saying like, oh, no, really, you shouldn't do that. I did that once, and here were the bad consequences. I felt a lot of pain to learn to distinguish these things. Separation, saying, okay, those people do this and that, but I don't want to be a part of it. They're part of a pyramid scheme. I don't want to be part of that pyramid scheme. So you're discriminating. You're choosing between choices. So as opposed to all this nonsense, like what does being woke mean? It means, looking at yourself, being watchful over your own heart, right? And learning to discriminate good from evil so that you could choose good, not just pointing at somebody else and saying, oh, they did some bad. You look at yourself and you see what you have done wrong. Cool. Oh, and then one note here that I think is relevant. So Merriam-Webster, they say the semantics of the newer use of woke in terms of social justice stuff, however, evolving. And it's increasingly used as a general pejorative for anyone who is or appears to be politically left-leaning. The spikes and lookup mentioned above all correlate to instances in which reactions to racial and social injustice are dismissed as being, quote-unquote, woke. So here, let's go back to Confucius, rectification of names. Things are evolving. Everything's becoming wishy-washy, confused in a soup of confusion, including people who might say that they're on the political right, who buy in and use the terminology like woke. Even if you're reacting against it, by using their terms, you give power to these words and you throw a perfectly good word in the trash can by accepting and using the incorrect usage of it. So it's not just like, take, use, and abuse these specific senses of words. It's like, why are we even using some of these new senses for words at all? Why don't we return to just speaking properly? And if there's nothing good to say, nothing useful for these words to use, then why would we even use these words at all? So I would say, like, my personal recommendation, and I will try to follow this myself, is I don't even use a word like woke, because I don't think it's useful or good. One slang I am very guilty of that, some slang I think is fun and useful. For example, like nowadays, you might have heard the terms like cringe and based. I actually like these words because I think that they're actually they're correct names. So for instance, when we talk about cringe, like what is the act of cringing? It's like you're disgusted by something, so you kind of cringe, right? So for instance, if we think about our own lives and things we've done, things we've said, we might say that something is cringe if it's like we regret doing it. We don't do that anymore, and we don't want to bring up memory of doing that. And it would be like if you're friends with somebody, you don't want to bring up cringe things that your friends did. That's not a very nice thing to do to your friends. You'll probably lose friends over the long run if you do things like that. But I think that the word like cringe as a kind of adjective descriptive term, I mean, it's very relevant and correctly names a state that you feel about hearing some stuff like, oh yeah, remember when we would, I don't know, like, let's name something that would be like nonsense, like squeeze out ketchup packets over the floor of In-N-Out burgers while watching cartoons. Okay, it's like causing trouble, just totally bad, and it's like, oh, okay, that's kind of cringe. Or like, remember when I was like so obsessed with anime, I wouldn't sleep, I would just watch anime all day, or something. I'd be like, that's cringe. Okay, it's like we don't want to think about this. We don't want to remember this, or some fashion phase or something. It's like, ugh, kind of cringe. On the other hand, the word based, it's like based on what? So if you actually are saying things or you are doing things based on something good, something solid, like building a house on a foundation of rock versus sand, something like that, then that's actually cool. That's good. So for instance, people will use the word based, or wholesome, which I think are actually like correct ways to describe certain activities. Like someone says, oh yeah, my wife and I started growing organic vegetables and giving them away for free to our neighbors, and giving them instructions on how to grow them if they also want to do the same. And so now we have like an abundance of produce. You might say, oh, that's based and wholesome. Okay, so in what sense is it based? Well, it's based on the idea that from the land and your hard work and through faith in God, trust that if you do certain activities that are good and lawful to do, that your endeavor will be blessed, then that's based on a particular tradition and teaching that's been passed down. And it's wholesome because it's like these foods, they'll help, and building these communities, bringing more people into your life. It's not just sitting by yourself on your computer on the internet like me right now, but it's including more people, building like a wholesome relationship. So it's like to say, oh, that's base, or oh yeah, that's wholesome. It's like these are actually 正名, correct rectification. There's no need for rectification of names. These are already correct, good, appropriate words to describe these activities. Whereas on the other hand, right, some other activities you may have done in the past, hopefully, we're all trying to fix ourselves and do right. Those would be cringe. Anyways, I just bring this up to say I'm not like anti-slang. I'm not saying we shouldn't use any new words, but when we're choosing to use words, have discrimination, right? We could choose words that we think appropriately reflect reality and describe how things are, and then words that are like invented by somebody else to sort of push a new way of thinking about things. Maybe that sort of word we throw in the garbage can, we don't use. Like woke in the sense of racial, social justice, things like that. Why do we have to express in that way? Don't say that somebody is woke. Say, oh yeah, this person seems to repeat the talking points that have been given to them by educational institutions and NGOs or something, something like that might actually be a much more correct description for what they're doing, that more accurately describes the state of affairs. Whereas if we just start to use a shorthand like woke, then very soon we'll just be like, oh, woke, left, right, very stupid, reactive sort of behavior that will result from wholesale adapting these terms and the outlooks, the ideology behind the words that come with these. All right, let's skip nomad, infrastructure, cicadas. Okay, so these must be from different things. Oh, okay, here's one word. We'll just briefly talk on this. Cisgender, and I also heard about the word like heterosexual. Okay, don't even use the word heterosexual. Like don't use it. It's like you could say that you have a family and that you're married with a wife. Like these are real things, real categories, and that you seek to produce offspring or something like that. But for other activities that aren't associated with that, we already have other words for them, like fornication or bestiality, whatever. Like I'm not gonna go in and say more of these words because I don't think it's useful. But you get the point that we have various words in order to name things that you shouldn't do, but the normal state of affair, the correct way in which things are supposed to be, then we already have good, fully appropriate, normal ways to say it and express this. Now, on the other hand, if you concede ground, like you start saying stuff like, oh, are you woke or are you not woke, you start talking to their terms, then it's kind of like everything in your life becomes selectable options from drop-down menus given to you by the establishment. So it's like, what's your favorite color? Oh, what are my choices? Orange, red, blue, purple, whatever. Select your color. Oh, what are your gender preferences? Blah, blah. Oh, select it from a drop-down menu, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. Who's to say that the people making these forms should be the ones that are deciding the categories of reality for you? That's not based. That's cringe, right? What is it based on? What some corporate meeting described? So going back to rectification of names here. Rectification of names dealing with reality. So we want terms to correspond and name how things actually are. When we have forms that are full of all sorts of nonsense, all sorts of categories, and forcing people to make choices that the answer is your form sucks, then why would you even say anything? So for instance, like friend here, George, he's in a non-USA country. In his country, he was telling me about how they force people to vote. Whether you want to vote or not, you have to make choices. But what if you're saying, I don't choose this leader or that leader. Like, I don't know about you people, or I don't like any of you people. What if that's your position? Or even saying, like, it is not my authority to make this choice. So I do not want to participate in a ritual pretending I have a choice in this matter. Like, all of those could express an attitude or a way of looking at things that somebody might actually have. But with the forms, the whatever you call them, ballots, they might be forced to sort of speak, to use these categories that are not corresponding with reality. So, like for us, in the capacity that we lead organizations, that we're given positions of authority, given power to implement different policies, right? Then one thing we could do is make an effort to use rectification of names, properly call things by what they are, properly have options that correspond to reality, and in doing so, it's like everything just makes more sense and things go smoothly because it's the right thing to do. All right, Hecka says, fun fact. Robin Hood on their career page asks what your gender identity is. It gives you a list of 8 choices, and then he lists those 8 choices. And some of them are pretty specific. Right, so this is to say, it's like, why should a bunch of financial people or banksters decide on the categories of reality? Okay, here's another interesting topic. We won't go into it today, but with the streams, actually, let me write this down. So, in English, we have this phrase, still in Chinese mode. Is that a thing? And a thing is kind of like a category that people might use. There's this guy who, I think he's banned from YouTube now, called Computing Forever is the name of his channel. But he has a show which is called How Is This a Thing? You can look it up. But basically, it's like his kind of news coverage show where he goes through and he gives his commentary on all sorts of wild happenings all around the world. But yes, so oftentimes we're told the various things, the various categories, the ways in which we're supposed to think about the world. That is the purpose of a lot of education. And educators oftentimes will be explicit in this. Let me pull up another example. So, for instance, our president, Biden framework. Okay, it's like treating and managing people like a computer program. And I'm just going to search education framework. So let's look at what this means. All right. What is an educational framework? What is a framework? Okay, no. Totally on topic for this stream, okay? Title of the stream is dealing with the proper naming of things. Ortho. 正名. What does it mean, okay? So when you're building a building, you want the frame to be like square, right? You have a square to check if things are square, to line up pieces of woods, to make things structurally sound, to make things good and nice and working, okay? So what is the fake and perverted and twisted and warped version of that in this modern world? One place in which this happens a lot is if you search for this keyword framework, you'll see it everywhere. So here, let's look at this. What is a framework? The Canadian Oxford Dictionary defines a framework as, quote, an essential supporting structure or a basic system. So it makes sense like in real life for buildings and things like that. Okay. At a school, a framework is the most essential supporting educational structure, and when designed correctly, it becomes the foundation upon which everything else is built. A framework is not a copy paste from another school, it is something which is custom designed and tailor made. A framework's design is the direct representation of a school's vision, philosophy, values, curriculums, and student needs as shown in the samples below. So we could check out a couple of these. Transdisciplinary framework. So this is basically saying, you do all sorts of stuff. Performing arts, visual arts, physical education, language arts, unit of inquiry, math, MFL, ESL, learning. All right, let's look at another one. How about the innovator's mindset framework? And this one, they have a picture. Change the mindset of students and unleash their talents and innovative ideas. Unleash staff talent and innovative ideas. Individualized teacher planners to shift the mindset. As everyone's ideas stem from the same power source. Educational framework, vision, philosophy, values, curriculum, and so on and so forth. Okay, so all these educational frameworks, it's like, what are they trying to teach people? What are they trying to base people on? I mean, maybe one way to describe it is just saying everything except for God. It's like, what happened to investigating the foundations of Western civilization? What about that? Or seeing what is the purpose of life? Can humans be saved? Stuff like this, or any of these motivating questions or philosophies of this framework. Instead, it's like the how could I distract myself and build technology framework. How could I endlessly cope framework. All right. So here's example, educational framework. So is it straight? Is it the correct naming of things? It's basically, how do I build wonky, non-straight, ugly looking buildings framework. That's what sort of framework it is. All right, let's look at a different framework. This is a current framework that's being attempted to use to run the United States of America. So let's read. Okay, President JB believes that there's no greater economic engine, we'll get back to this, in the world than the hard work and ingenuity of the American people. But for too long, the economy has worked great for those at the top while working families get squeezed. All right, 证明, we're looking at the correct namings of things. I want to show you all the etymology of the word economy. Because did you know, people didn't talk about economics forever in the sense that we as modern people understand economics. What is economics? It's just like people in suits who can't, they couldn't make money themselves in another way. Otherwise, they would just trade on Robinhood and make a bunch of money. But instead, they have to tell people how money works. Well, if you read The Technological Society by Jacques Ellul, or you watch my previous streams on this, you'll learn that really economists are more something like people who manage the political levers in society in order to try to steer and shape society in a particular way. And we could see this in the etymology of the word economy. So, economy, from economy, economics, from Latin oikonomia, from ancient Greek oikonomia, which means management of a household, administration. So let's talk a little bit about monarchs and rulers in light of recent events. You could think of a nation, a kingdom, a monarchy, something like that, as a kind of extended household. So what we would call a monarch as a head of a state is saying this is the head, the most representative person of a particular family. With Asians, this is super apparent. If you've met a Vietnamese person named Tran or Trin or Nguyen or something like that, you will find that those are some of the names of like rulers, because these rulers were the heads of these households. So let's just look. I'm going to totally butcher the pronunciations of anything I try to do here because I don't speak Vietnamese at all. But if we look at the list of the monarchs of Vietnam, you will find that the names that they have are also the names of all sorts of people that you could meet if you go and you make friends with Vietnamese people. Like here, Tru, Trung, Mai, Phung, Lee. There's got to be a Nguyen. No Nguyen. Well, without the squiggles, it might not give it to me. Anyways, the point of this is just to say that as a head of the household in countries like Vietnam, oftentimes, right, the king would have a last name, and then everybody under the king would also follow and have a similar name to represent how they are part of the same household. They are part of the same unit, okay? So when we look at something like economy, economia, management of a household or administration, you could see how also it naturally extends to government. You could say, how do we steer, how do we manage who occupies what position in this place? So when you think economy, don't necessarily think about money. It's not just about money. Money is one of the ways in which decisions are made. But it's just like in any household, there might be non-money ways in which decisions are made as well. It just so happens in our current society, money is a huge thing, as opposed to, I don't know, property rights, hereditary considerations, things like that. Money is one of the big ways in which we decide who goes where, who gets what. So you say, why would somebody, work in McDonald's for 10 hours a day, 7 days a week? Why would somebody do that? Well, the way in which the nation is run, the management of the household called, say, the United States, is such that that sort of role is created and somebody is encouraged to fill it. Likewise, you could look at like nice beachside homes. How is it that somebody lives there? What does one have to do in order to occupy that, position in society? Could you go to the beach whenever you want? Could you go to the beach only on some days, and so on and so forth? All these things you could see as a sense of economy in the sense of management of a household. So when we look at the United States and we're talking about economy, the correct naming of things, what does economy really mean? Economy means something like, right, management of the household. So how is the management of the household of, say, the United States run? Well, it's under a framework that isn't so orthogonal. And is it run by a person? Well, even here, like we can see in the rhetoric here, an economic engine. It's like a machine analogy. So it's like, is it people that are running things? It's more like a mechanistic, weird, mechanical corporation. Like, what is it? Okay, so let's continue. But for too long, the economy has worked great for those at the top, while working families got squeezed. President B promised to rebuild the backbone of the country. All right, so interesting word choice there. The middle class, so that this time everything comes along. The Build Back Better framework does just that. Okay, quote in a different font. Oh, that was like an abstract intro paragraph. Now this is typeset a little bit smaller with some details. This framework will set the United States on course to meet its climate goals, create millions of good-paying jobs, enable more Americans to join and remain in the labor force, and grow our economy from the bottom up and the middle out. Okay, so let's just talk once again about the sense of this word economy. economy, management of a household. So if we think of like a nation like the United States as a kind of extended household, and that it's a bunch of people that inhabit the same land, what are the things that are used to manage a household? So the correct way to manage a household would, be out of love and consideration for all the members, right? Trying to give people a place where they could work, they could live, they could take care of all their needs, right? That makes sense intuitively as saying, like, yes, that would be a good, proper way to run a household. But what is the household that we're in built on? Meeting climate goals. So, like, controlling how much you breathe, how much you consume. It's like you have to drive to work for this many hours. Stop using gasoline. Oh, but can you afford a car? Crazy, stupid, contradictory. Okay? Create millions of good paying jobs. So you could say, as economy, management of the household, think, what does the country want people to be occupying their time with? So create millions of good paying jobs. What if that meant literally sitting in an office and just pressing buttons? That would fulfill the goal of creating millions of good paying jobs if you control the money supply. Enable more Americans to join and remain in the labor force. So if you consider sitting in a room pressing a button as being in the labor force, and you get paid a lot to do that, or being plugged into the matrix, choose your adventure. We could put on our evil dictator hats and talk about how we might set things up. Should we go more Brave New World or 1984 style? Seems like more like Brave New World now, with happy drugs and stuff. That's another story. We'll get there a different day. To do and grow our economy from the bottom up and the middle out. So this is just an appeal talking about how it's not just for rich people, but for more people, more inclusive people. So another way to read this paragraph is like, let's just get everybody to plug into the matrix and subsidize them on, some kind of subsistence system, whether that's through universal basic income or some kind of pension thing, or something else. You would see that sort of like dystopian future type idea would perfectly fit the bill for this. Climate goals, creating millions of good paying jobs, enable most Americans to join and remain in the labor force. Nothing is being said about here like more Confucian ideas, like is the focus here on ensuring social harmony, or having undertakings being completed, or having where was that quote about proprieties? Oh yeah, is it about having proprieties and music flourishing? It's like, no, that's not the goal of this particular framework. It's about managing people to kind of subsist as like cattle on a farm. All right. So, talked about economy. 证明. Looking at the rectification of names. What are the correct use of terms, and how does society, the world at large, how are we told different ways to use words, and how are words introduced with new senses, and how does this condition us to think about things in a particular way, whereas that way that we're told to think about things does not always, usually does not properly correspond with reality. All right, we got a question from Reaper. I think after this, we'll call it a day, but let's try to answer and look at what Reaper has to say. He says, since you're talking about what the Gov thinks is a good idea for the economy, which is measured by GDP, what do you think of Bhutan measuring itself via GDH, gross domestic happiness? It's bound to fail. I mean, it's just a kind of utilitarianism based on something else. You can't take God out of the picture. It won't work. You could try. You could maybe perhaps temporarily get get better results. But it's like, how would you measure and optimize happiness or something like that? It just, to me, it seems quite contrived, and I personally think that it's a no-go, though it could perhaps be better than like GDP. So it could be better than GDP, but I don't think it's gonna like solve the world's problems or something like that. And I would say, in terms of like, well, okay, so you could look at a concept like happiness. This also too will tie directly in to the topic of this stream. Okay, so you could ask yourself, what does happiness mean? I think there's words like happiness that are thrown around a lot nowadays, but if you really think about what they mean or try to explain it or something, then maybe it is not so easy, because these things are not super well defined. I'll talk about happiness specifically, and we'll look at the first Psalm of the Bible and talk about that briefly. Yeah, okay, another word too, for instance, is fun. Okay, so I kind of heard a joke, which is like Russians don't have a word for fun. And I also heard like a lot of other nations that were Orthodox civilizations, they don't really have a word for fun. I'll use Spanish as an example. So let's go to wordreference.com. Let's translate the word fun. And I'll show you what we get. So we get this word divertido, which sounds like the English word, etymologically related to diversion, right? So what is fun? It's kind of like distracting and diverting your attention, like instead of focusing, concentrating, that sort of thing. The idea of fun is kind of diversion. So in society, we throw around and we use this word like fun a lot, like, oh yeah, like let's have family fun near Sacramento. What is family fun near Sacramento? And then you'll get, like you could go to an amusement park. You could, all these activities. You could go to Alcatraz, take funny pictures of you in jail. So on and so forth. All these things that are fun. So what does fun mean, right? Look at the etymologies. 长名, rectification of names. It's like, oh yeah, you're just looking at effective ways to like distract yourself, so you don't have to think about like death and eternity. Which sometimes, like we're humans, we're people. We have to be distracted. We have to rest. We have to get a good night rest sometimes. But let's not try to say my life goal is to maximize fun. That would be saying like, oh, it feels good taking a good poo on the toilet, so I want to maximize my life to have the maximum number of good poos. Like, it's kind of sounds like a pretty shitty life. Oh, joke. Okay. Anyways, going back to something like, so happiness. What does happiness mean? I don't know. Like, so if I search, let's look at the Spanish dictionary again. Like, how would they translate happiness? Felicidad, dicha, alegría, something like that. Dictionary. Felicidad. Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad. Okay, felicity. What does that mean? Okay, so then this feliz goes back to felicitas, And here, look, happy, blessed, fortunate, lucky, fertile, fruitful, prosperous, auspicious, favorable. Okay, so people talk about like happiness these days, and what do they mean by it? Like that you're amused, that you're fulfilled. Like what exactly does it mean? Whereas if you go back, investigate some of the etymologies of the words, you look at the original senses of these words, you'll find happiness, for example, might mean living a fulfilling life, and part of a fulfilling life might be being fruitful. So if you go to the Bible, to the scriptures, then you could find all sorts of parables about seeds and bearing fruit, and what sort of, and the pain and things, the suffering that you must go through in order, and the work and the toil that you must go through in order to be able to do these things. So, happiness in the sense of being like fruitful and multiplying, fertile, fortunate, like having wealth, having things to share, right? It's a particular way of being, of going about doing things, and you don't achieve that state, right, unless you act correctly. Basically, if you act in a lawless manner, things aren't going to work. I was going to bring up Psalm 1 here. So in some translations, I've seen this as, rather than blessed is the man, it's like happy is the man, something like that. So I don't know, what would this say? Probably a lot of people use the word blessed. Let's go to English Standard Version. Okay. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. So this person is happy, they're blessed because they follow a particular path, and because they follow this particular way of doing things, then they feel peace. They have certain experiences will follow. The experiences aren't the goal, but this is just to say that it's just like if you eat a whole bunch, then you're gonna feel bloated. You're gonna feel a certain way. But if you choose to be disciplined and follow like a diet and do certain stuff, then you'll feel another way. So you could say a similar thing applies, right? Not just in bodily way of being, but in more spiritual ways of being too. And you could say blessed, right, is the man, or happy is the man who follows a particular path. Just like you could say healthy is the person who does X, Y, and Z in terms of their health. There's like physical, natural law, and then we could also see that with the spiritual things too, the things that are unseen, that also there's likewise a law at work. And people who delight in the law and love the Lord and meditate on the law day and night, they're able to discover and optimize themselves to be maximally blessed. Now, if you tried to say, well, what is blessed mean? And you started to try to think about it and categorize it based on metrics. We'll say like, well, yeah, most people are fulfilled if they have something that they're responsible for. So let's give everybody something that they're responsible for. Yeah, it is true that, that might actually help people out in that, if you give people opportunities to have some duties and to fulfill them, then, people are probably going to be feeling much more better doing that than if you just gave them totally nothing to do. But this is not strictly how it is. There could be a person who isn't given any responsibilities, but then they find responsibilities, for themselves. They commit themselves to some sort of practice and so on and so forth. Like, who knows? Every individual's situation is different. But for a state to try to plan and to think that no one could take care of everybody and optimize something like quote unquote happiness, to me, I don't know. It depends on how based you are. If you're based on the right thing, it'll work. But if you're not based, then it's probably going to collapse on itself. All right. Reaper says pursuit of happiness in the U.S. Constitution is not about fun. It's about having a family and living a productive life. Most people misunderstand this. Yeah, I mean, it could be like about that, like you're free to do that or free not to do that. I mean, I think that like I don't regard the Constitution as like sacred scriptures and say, oh, we need to go back to what the founding fathers. I don't say anything like that. Um, so I'm sure people have different views about this sort of thing. But clearly, with advertising and stuff, there's a lot of encouragement to go about fun and happiness in a particular, consumerist sort of way. Not that there's anything wrong with consuming product per se. I myself visited Starbucks today. All right. Reaper says Bhutan.gov GNH is based on psychological well-being, health, education, time use, cultural diversity, and resilience, good governance, community vitality, ecological resilience, and living standards. So, I mean, going back to Zhengming, rectification of names, I mean, all these things, obviously we know that these are supposed to be kind of feel-good terms, but unless these things clearly name, like, why don't we say that our society is based on, like if you said our society is based on providing the best environment for people to peacefully pursue Christian virtue. Such places exist, they're called monasteries, right? And it's a material thing. You could read about them. You could go visit one. So there's, it's not speculation, kind of how it would work, what it would be. Whereas like, this Bhutan thing, it sounds like a bunch of baseless utopian type thinking. So that's not to say that there can't be people that achieve a blessed state in that, or people that prefer to live in that over other, like, I don't know about, I've never met someone from Bhutan as far as I know, but that's to say, I think that oftentimes in the West we're given lots of foreign stuff to look at. Like one famous example is this whole like wabi sabi thing. In America, it's officially cool and trendy to say like, oh, I like to hear these various Asian ideas and how that's foreign and cool, and we need to be like those Asians who are at peace with nature and so on and so forth. In traditional Japanese aesthetics, wabi-sabi is a worldview centered on the acceptance of transience and imperfection. The aesthetic is sometimes described as one of appreciating beauty that is imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete in nature, blah, blah, and so on and so forth. So it's like, if you drop words like wabi-sabi and, you have your little rock garden and you like these things, then, chances are in the world's eyes, you're a pretty cool cat. But is it based? That's the question. Based on what? And with that, I will conclude this stream. Thank you all for joining, for tuning in. Please let me know in the comments or the chat if there's any topics you would want me to cover in the near future. And I'll try to give a little bit more advance notice before I stream next time. But I thank you all for joining that did today. And I wish you a good night. Thank you.